The Realm. Do you know what the Realm is? It's the 1,000 blades of Aegon's enemies. A story we agreed to tell each other over and over till we forget that it's a lie.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back for another Game of Thrones video. In this video, I will show you what happens in my own version of Game of Thrones Season 9. As I'm sure most of you know by now, I have been writing my own season of Game of Thrones. This is what I think HBO should have done if they decided to make another season of the show. I basically started making these videos because I know a lot of us were left unsatisfied with how Game of Thrones ended. So, I began my season right where HBO left off, at the end of their 8th season. I have made 8 of my own episodes so far. I would recommend watching all of those first before you start watching this video, otherwise you will not fully understand what's happening. In this episode, you will see what happens during what will most likely be the very last battle in Westeros. This is Season 9, Episode 9, which I am naming the final chapter. Shall we begin? In the opening scene of this episode, we will see a massive army marching along the King's Road. All of their footsteps sound like the beating of a drum. There are thousands of soldiers made up of the different armies throughout Westeros and even Essos. The soldiers of the north are marching at the front of the line as they are being led by Jon Snow, Ghost, Howland Reed, Giantsbane, Brienne, Ser Podrick, Ser Davos, Lord Tyrion, and Samwell. Right behind them are the bannermen of House Baratheon, led by Gendry Baratheon and Arya Stark. Following right behind them are what remains of the Unsullied army. As always, they are led by Grey Worm. And right behind them are the 1,000 slave soldiers from the Fiery Hand, who are led by Kinvara and Makaro. At the back of the formation, we can see there are about a dozen small boats being held by some of those slave soldiers. Each of those small boats might be able to hold about 30 men. The sun is shining down on all of them, but not for long. As the sun is resting high in the sky, it is suddenly smothered by a massive black shadow when Drogon fully extends his enormous black wings in front of it. His dragon scales are glistening as he soaks up the sunlight. Right on the back of Drogon is Daenerys, who leans over on her side when the dragon makes a hard left off the King's Road as they begin heading for a large castle that is sitting off in the distance. The thousands of men below make a left as well. We go back to the front of the army, where Jon Snow and Howland Reed are riding on horseback. The large item that was on Howland Reed's back is now slung over the side of his horse. It's actually bouncing off the horse's leg after every step it makes. This is when Jon Snow will ask Howland Reed what he has been hiding under that blanket. Howland Reed flashes a faint smile before he says, "You will see soon enough, Jon Snow. It is a gift that I have brought for you." Jon doesn't know whether to be happy about this or not. "I'm not sure if I like the sound of that," says Jon, who shows a thin smile as well. Right over Jon's shoulder, we can see Samwell on his horse making his way to the front of the line. He rides up beside Jon and Howland Reed, right as Jon begins asking him something else. Jon looks back over at Lord Howland, then says, "How many of us do you think will actually make it out of this alive? Do you really think we will be able to save Bran?" Howland Reed doesn't answer him right away. He looks into the sky, at Drogon and Dany flying off in the distance. When he looks back at Jon, he says, "Well, it's as I've said before. What will you be willing to sacrifice, Jon Snow? Now, as for your brother Bran, I will not make any assurances that you will get him out of here alive, but that doesn't mean you can't help save everyone else. I know you want your brother back, believe me I do, but you also must remember, his life isn't the only one at stake." Jon silently looks away. He looks in front of him, at the castle that grows larger with each step they make. He watches as Drogon and Daenerys fly in a circle above the castle, its 5 long fingers reaching into the sky. Finally, Jon looks back at Howland Reed and says, "What was your sacrifice, my lord? When I met you out beyond the wall, you once said, 'You made the greatest sacrifice of all.' What did you mean by that?" There is another long silence before anything is said. Howland Reed looks in Jon's eyes and says, "My own flesh and blood. I sacrificed my very own son, Jon Snow." This new revelation stuns Jon, but before he can follow up on what he said, Samwell rides up alongside them with a letter in hand. "I was hoping I could have a moment with you before the battle begins," says Samwell. "This was sent from the Citadel before you arrived in King's Landing. I wasn't sure what to make of it at first, but I have a feeling you will know what it means soon enough. Here, I want you to have it." Sam reaches out and hands Jon the letter before falling back into formation. Jon's eyes open up a little wider as he unfolds the letter. There is an image in the center with a few words written above it. The only thing John focuses on is the drawing of what looks like the face of a werewood. He studies it for a few moments. When John begins folding the letter, we will see that this werewood's face is surrounded by fire. Lord Hallen Reed says we're here. When John finally looks back up, he sees an island surrounded by a large blue lake. Jon Snow, Hallen Reed, Samwell, Davos, Brienne, and all the others begin hopping off of their horses. Arya, Gendry, and Lord Tyrion Lannister walk up behind them. Everyone stands near the edge of the water as they look out across the lake at the Sacred Isle of Faces. "It doesn't look like anyone is here," says Gendry. "It will not remain that way," says Hallen Reed. "Not when night falls." Jon is resting his hand on the hilt of his sword when he says, "Then we better get everyone over there before that happens. Have the men start dropping the boats in the water. The sun will be setting soon." Drogon and Daenerys are still flying above Harrenhal. They drop down over the God's Eye, but when Daenerys looks down onto the island, she's not able to see anything through all of the heavy brush. Having a bird's eye view isn't really helping them, at least not yet. It doesn't look like there is anyone on the Isle of Faces from up above either. When Daenerys sees them dropping the boats into the water, she lands her dragon on the shore of the lake. "We don't have enough boats for everyone, so make sure they are sent back across until we get all of our men over there on the island," says Jon. One of the Northmen nods his head before stepping into one of the small boats himself. Hallen Reed grabs the large item from his horse, then he slings it back over his shoulder. Lord Tyrion Lannister walks over by Ser Podrick, who is helping Brienne with her armor. He greets them with a thin smile before he looks at Ser Podrick and says, "I have something I want to give you." When he looks at Brienne, she nods her head, freeing him of his duty. He then follows Lord Tyrion, who walks around the other side of his horse. He watches him with uncertainty, unsure of what this is all about. After another moment, Lord Tyrion emerges from behind the horse, and in his hands he is holding a sword. When he stands before him, he says, "This was my brother Jaime's sword. It's no good in my hands. I'm not sure if you will need it, but I can't think of a better man alive that should have it." "My lord, this is Valyrian steel," says Ser Podrick. "It is," says Lord Tyrion. "It was made from House Stark's ancestral Valyrian steel sword. Brienne has one half, and now you have the other. Here." He reaches out and grabs the sword from his hands. When he holds it out in front of him, the fading sun glimmers off the ripples in the blade. "Thank you, my lord," says Ser Podrick. Lord Tyrion smiles, then he walks away. We then see Daenerys loading Grey Worm and the Unsullied men on the back of her dragon. The small boats are making their way back across now. Jon motions for Samwell and Davos. They follow him as he signals for Lord Tyrion as well. Jon says, "I want you three to stay over here. Now, I don't mean to offend any of you, but if we don't succeed without you, I don't think 3 extra men will make that much of a difference. I'm hoping we are back before sunrise." Jon then abruptly walks away. Ghost follows right behind him. He stops one of his Northmen as he makes his way back near the shore. Jon says, "Make sure you unload the wagon full of dragonglass now. There is more than enough to fill one of these boats on its own." Jon had hundreds, if not thousands, of dragonglass weapons brought down from Winterfell. They were what was left over from the long night battle against the Night King. The Northman bows his head before walking away. Jon's eyes suddenly look for the sky as he hears the sound of 100 screaming ravens from above the Isle of Faces. It is a dreadful sound that reminds him of why he is here. Kinvara and Makaro fall in next to Jon as he walks alongside the lake. Kinvara's glowing red eyes find Jon's. She says, "Your brother will be waiting for you, Jon Snow, but he is no longer the man that you think he is. The werewoods have corrupted his mind. Only the purest death will cleanse his soul now." Anger flashes inside Jon's eyes. He grabs Kinvara by the throat, but he lets go immediately after her red ruby burns his hand. "Why would you say that?" Jon says angrily. "We are sorry, Jon Snow, but this night will be dark and full of terror," says Kinvara. "Only the fire will burn them all away now." Jon runs over to the shore, then signals for everyone to get inside the boats. He looks at Hallen Reed, then yells, "We must leave, now!" Lord Hallen Reed jumps in the boat, then gives them a shove off the shore. When Jon looks back, he sees Kinvara standing there staring at him, her bright red ruby glowing all the while. The rest of the dozen or so boats are filled with the slave soldiers of R'hllor. The ends of their weapons are now lit up with a red and orange flame. This section of the lake almost looks as if it's on fire. The sun is now setting. There is a full moon sitting above the God's Eye on this evening. As the darkness falls, the Sacred Isle of Faces finally starts to come alive. The shrieking sound of ravens are now heard from the forest in the center of the island. This is followed up by the sound of ominous screams that echo across the silent lake. All of the soldiers that are standing in formation on the shore of the Isle of Faces begin looking at each other with a hint of fear in their eyes. The moonlit sky is suddenly blackened as Drogon and Daenerys circle around the island again. Daenerys watches from above, but she still doesn't see any movement from within the center of the forest. Gendry walks over by Arya, then says, "Do you feel that?" "Feel what?" asked Arya. "The weirwoods," says Gendry. "Do you feel them looking at you? Because I do." Arya looks at all the different weirwoods that surround the Isle of Faces. All of them are looking back at them with hatred in their eyes. The faces look nothing like the face on the weirwood back at Arya's home of Winterfell. Arya knows she is not welcome here, but she moves forward anyway. All of the 1,000 slave soldiers of R'hllor have finally arrived on the island. They begin standing in formation waiting for the signal. Grey Worm, as well as his Unsullied men, are lined up beside them. All of Gendry's bannermen and the men of the North are now here also. Only a few of them remain on the last of the boats with Jon Snow and Howland Reed, who are landing ashore now. When Jon, Ghost, and Lord Howland Reed jump out, they grab their boat and drag it up onto the beach. They walk around all of the soldiers to the front of the formation as they watch the final boat land on the shore. As soon as Kinvara and Moqarro step foot on the Isle of Faces, a massive shadow falls from the sky before unleashing a blue fireball onto the lake. The black shadow vanishes back into the night sky as the entire lake goes up in blue flames. Everyone who is standing on the shore of this sacred island is left feeling stunned by how fast this happened. Daenerys looks up into the sky, thinking whatever it was dropped down from above her. Jon looks over at Kinvara with a sudden rage. He thinks that she has somehow done this since it happened right after she stepped off the boat. Moqarro notices this, so he walks over to Jon and sets his large hand on his shoulder, then says, "It has begun, Jon Snow. There is no escaping this now. They don't want us leaving here alive." The Isle of Faces is now surrounded by a massive blue ring of fire. The reflection of the flames are seen in the blood-red eyes of Ghost. The White Direwolf begins looking into all of the eyes of the weirwoods in front of them. We suddenly hear what sounds like the screams of 1,000 dying voices from within the woods. Jon Snow, Ghost, Howland Reed, Arya, Gendry, Grey Worm, as well as everyone else begins descending on the center of this island, in search of Brandon Stark. Black shadows begin shifting throughout the woods all around them. While Daenerys and Drogon are scanning the area from above, Dany suddenly notices a massive fire start from within the middle of the God's Eye. Dany does get a glimpse of small black shadows dancing around the orange and red flames. Everyone on the ground is walking very slowly, dreading what lies ahead. When Jon and the others look up, they see hundreds of ravens sitting on the branches, watching them with their white eyes as they move inward. All of them ready their weapons as they see more and more shadows shifting around in the woods. Dragonglass arrows start raining down on them from above. Dozens of soldiers begin falling down all around them. "Where are they?" yells Giantsbane. "They're up in the trees," Brienne shouts back. Everyone suddenly looks above them. They're not able to see who they are or exactly what they are. All they see are yellow and golden cat's eyes glowing back at them. The slave soldiers of the Fiery Hand rush in. The end of their weapons are lit up on fire with orange and red flames. They hold their weapons near the bottom of the trees, catching them all on fire. The island begins burning from within. Then, in an instant, the little green men jump out of the sky with their dragonglass weapons in hand, landing all around them. Everyone starts hacking and slicing at the small green men in front of them, and now behind them. Brienne lops off one of their heads with her Valyrian steel sword. Their great big golden cat's eyes are still glowing as their heads go bouncing off the ground. One of the green men sticks their dragonglass spear into the back of Gendry's leg, but he spins around and slices off its head in one swift move. Howland Reed falls as an arrow goes into his shoulder and back. He lets out a scream as his body hits the ground. Ghost dives through the air and sinks his razor-sharp teeth into the face of one of the small childlike soldiers. We watch as its golden and green eyes fade to black as its life leaves its body. When one of the little green men jumps on Tormund Giantsbane's back, he reaches behind him and grabs it by its throat. He smashes its head against a rock, while screaming like a madman. Arya grabs her Valyrian steel dagger, then jams it into the ear of one of the green men, dropping it instantly. Sir Podrick slices another one of them in half, before dropping another one from running up behind Brienne. Daggers and swords rise and fall, then rise and fall one after another, until the forest goes silent again. The little green men were no match for thousands of soldiers dressed in armor. Jon helps Howland Reed get back on his feet. He still has the arrows in his back and shoulder. Giant's Bane walks over and yanks them out. He can still move on his own. Gendry is now limping from the injury in his leg, but everyone else seems to be fine, for now. All of them begin moving forward again, even slower than before. After walking only a few more feet, Jon and the others begin hearing something else shifting around in the dark woods in front of them. In the matter of moments, there are suddenly very large shadows all around them. Jon raises a fist, signaling for everyone to stop where they are. Everyone falls silent as they listen to the sound of leaves crunching and branches breaking in the darkness. The slave soldiers of R'hllor hold out their weapons in front of them, hoping to see what's out there around them as their flames drive away the shadows. Jon's eyes have a sudden look of disbelief when he starts to see blue eyes faintly glowing all around him. Their eyes look at the sky when they unexpectedly hear a thunderous scream from a dragon ring out across the island. The resurrected Rhaegal drops from the sky. Daenerys is so horrified by the sight and sound of Rhaegal she nearly falls off Drogon, but she holds herself up by one of his spikes. Rhaegal immediately lets out his blue flame, but Drogon dives through the sky in order to dodge it. Samwell, Davos, and Lord Tyrion are still standing near the water on the other side of the lake. They begin running for the castle of Harrenhal when they see Rhaegal emerge in the night sky. Everything lights up with red and blue flames as the dragons unleash their fire on each other one after another. Back on the ground, Jon and everyone else form a line as they see the glowing eyes move in for the kill. Some of Rhaegal's blue fireballs begin striking the island, lighting up everything around them. They suddenly see what's heading their way. There are dozens and dozens of White Walkers riding on the backs of giant elks. The slave soldiers of R'hllor rush in to deliver the first blow. One by one, the White Walkers begin snuffing out their flaming weapons as each of the soldiers' lifeless bodies slam onto the ground. As the forest burns down all around them, Daenerys can finally see what's happening on the ground below her. From her view, we can see there are roughly 100 White Walkers closing in on everyone down below. Dany watches as Grey Worm throws his dragonglass spear, shattering one of the White Walkers and the giant elks it was riding on. The Unsullied men move in. Their weapons give them a slight advantage here since the White Walkers are now high off the ground. They form a shield around everyone standing in the center. As the White Walkers rush forward, they all thrust their spears out at once, shattering several of them before they can break their wall. Now, when some of the other White Walkers see this, they start charging on their giant elks. This begins knocking most of the Unsullied men down as they run them over, smashing some of their skulls beneath their feet. Dragonglass weapons are flying through the air everywhere. White Walkers shatter again, but not all of them. Some of the dragonglass misses, and it unfortunately hits a few of their own men, dropping them instantly. When one of the White Walkers sees Jon, it jumps down from the elk, with an ice sword in hand. Jon greets him with his own sword in hand. The White Walker swings its glowing ice sword right at Jon's head, but it misses by only inches after Jon bends down to avoid it. Right as Jon launches back up, he brings his sword with him, but this White Walker raises his own ice sword to block it. Their swords smash into each other in the air. When the swords meet, a shattering sound rings out throughout the forest. The White Walker's ice sword is fine. It was actually Jon's Valyrian steel sword that shattered. You see, these White Walkers are unlike the ones we have seen before. They themselves can still die by Valyrian steel and dragonglass, but their ice weapons are much stronger than their last ones. The children of the forest at the Isle of Faces made sure of that. While Jon is standing there in disbelief, holding nothing but his sword's handle, the White Walker brings its ice sword high above his head, moments away from delivering his fatal blow. As soon as the White Walker brings his sword down, Ser Podrick drives his own Valyrian steel sword through the back of this White Walker's head, shattering it before it can kill Jon. After only a few seconds, Jon finally gathers his senses, then he grabs a dragonglass weapon from the ground before entering the fight again. This is when the resurrected Rhaegal will drop out of the sky, unleashing his blue flame on dozens of Unsullied men standing on the ground. Another one of the White Walkers riding on one of the giant elks comes rushing through the field. A handful of Gendry's bannermen dive out of the way before they get ran over. Kinvara suddenly finds herself standing there all alone. Before she can move, the massive elk lowers its head, driving its rack of antlers right through her body, out her back. When Makaro sees that happen, he lets out an agonizing scream. He immediately raises his 6-foot-long iron staff high above his head. On the end of his staff is a dragon's head. As he continues to let out this booming scream, the dragon's eyes begin to glow green. He suddenly swings down the staff in a slicing motion, and when he does this, the dragon's head spits out a green flame that ignites everything in front of it. Dozens of White Walkers and their elks go up in flames instantly. We can hear the sound of crackling ice as White Walkers let out a scream of their own as they burn alive. This allows Jon and everyone else to finally move forward again. Most of the Isle of Faces is now on fire. There are red, orange, green, and blue flames everywhere. Davos, Lord Tyrion, and Samwell are horrified as they watch from below the castle of Harrenhal. All they're able to see is fire. From where they're at, it doesn't look like anyone will make it out of there alive. As everyone else is moving through the woods, Howland Reed stops Jon before they go any further. "Wait," says Howland Reed. "There is something you will need if you're going to end this tonight." Lord Howland Reed drops the large item from his back. Jon has been wondering what this is. As he unfolds it from the blankets and furs, Jon suddenly sees the reflection of fires in the steel. "I know Valyrian steel when I see it," says Jon. "Where did you get that?" "Its name is Dark Sister. It was once Lord Brynden Rivers. He gave it to me years ago and he said I would one day give it to you when the moment was right. You no longer have a sword of your own. I guess now is as good a time as any." Jon holds the sword firmly in his hands, then he nods his head and rushes forward into the flames. The Grove of Seven Werewoods is right up ahead, but everyone is suddenly stopped when another wave of White Walkers and giant elks head their way. As Jon looks behind them, he can see the biggest werewood he's ever seen in his life. He fixes his eyes on the enormous mouth at the base of it. As he looks inside, he instantly notices Bran is sitting there, with his eyes rolled back in his head. "Bran," Jon whispers. He says the name again, only louder. "Bran!" Everyone looks at Jon, who then sticks out his sword in Bran's direction. They all see him sitting in the werewood now as well. Arya grabs her dagger with her left hand, before throwing it out in front of her. The dagger slices right into one White Walker, shattering it immediately, but the dagger continues flying through the air, until it hits a White Walker right behind it, shattering that one also. The fires on the floor of the forest begin spreading all around them. Moqarro raises the iron staff in the air again, shooting out another green flame from the dragon's mouth. The grove of werewoods in front of them begin to go up in flames. Jon screams out, "No! We must get Bran out of there!" However, the werewoods all around him are now burning, locking Bran inside a green ring of fire. Jon and Arya run in to get him, but the massive flames stop them from moving any further. They run around the circle of werewoods looking for another opening, but they don't see one. White Walkers are still descending on their location. Gendry grabs Arya by her shoulder. He yells, "If we don't leave now, we will die here." Brienne and Grey Worm are still fighting off the enemy. Sir Podrick is rolling around on the ground. Some of his armor is melting while his uniform is on fire. It's absolute madness on the Isle of Faces. Howland Reed finds Jon again. He screams Jon's name before he says, "Get back to the shore now. Daenerys needs you. Your brother Bran is inside that dragon. You cannot save him, but maybe you can save her." Right as Howland Reed says that, a White Walker shoves his ice sword through his back and out the front of his belly. Jon looks in Howland Reed's eyes as he drops on his knees with blood running out of his mouth. This snaps Jon out of his haze. Now, before the White Walker removes the ice sword from Howland Reed's lifeless body, Jon angrily shoves his own sword into the White Walker's neck. After it shatters, Jon runs back to where they first landed on the island. Everything is burning behind him. There are red, green, orange, and blue flames everywhere. The dragons vanish as they fly through all of the smoke that is right above the Isle of Faces. Only Drogon and Daenerys emerge on the other side. They do a couple circles around the island looking for Rhaegal, but they don't see him. Neither does Jon. Daenerys and Drogon fly back into the black smoke again, only now when they come out the other side, Rhaegal is locked onto Drogon's wing. The undead dragon is biting and scratching holes in Drogon's side. The dragons are now spinning wildly out of control until Rhaegal releases and vanishes back into the smoke. Jon starts waving his sword hoping Dany notices it. She lands the dragon near him anyway. When Jon runs over by her, Dany yells down, "Drogon is hurt badly." Jon looks at the holes in Drogon's wing, then he shouts back, "Will he still be able to fly?" "I think so," says Dany, "although I don't know how much longer." Jon yells out again, "Let me go up with you. Let me help you." Now, before Dany answers, she looks into the woods, where there are now White Walkers running their way. "Get on," shouts Daenerys. Rhaegal drops back down out of the sky. One of the White Walkers grabs his ice spear as Jon is climbing on Drogon's back. Right as Jon sits down behind Dany, Drogon lifts from the ground. The White Walker throws his magical ice weapon, missing Drogon only by a few feet. As the dragon soars into the sky, Rhaegal dives down behind him, following them into the smoke. Jon yells out, "I need you to get above him." "Why?" shouts Dany. "What will you do?" After a few seconds, Jon says, "I don't know." Drogon ascends further into the night sky, rising higher and higher. They stay inside of the thick black smoke for several moments, almost as if they're hiding from Rhaegal. As soon as Dany sees the resurrected dragon down below them, she has Drogon dive down hundreds of feet. He slices right through the air like a speeding bullet. Then, as sudden as a thunderbolt, a shrieking Drogon dives onto Rhaegal, locking his fangs around the other dragon's neck. The dragons were now locked together as they begin falling out of the sky. The lake was suddenly rushing up at them with incredible speed. As the dragons fall further and further, Jon Snow stands up on Drogon's back with the Valyrian steel sword Dark Sister in his hand. Within the blink of an eye, Jon launches himself off Drogon's back. As he is flying through the sky, he raises Dark Sister high above his head. Daenerys is horrified as she watches this. When Jon falls down onto Rhaegal, he drives the Valyrian steel sword through the dragon's eye. He shoves it in with so much force, the end of the blade drives out the back of Rhaegal's throat. The resurrected dragon lets out an agonizing scream that can be heard throughout the Isle of Faces. Jon hangs on for dear life as the dragon drops out of the sky. Half a heartbeat later, Rhaegal struck the lake, sending thousands of gallons of water up into the sky. Daenerys looks down and watches as the dragon slips beneath the water. The lake boiled with dragon's blood, and then was still. Daenerys immediately lands Drogon on the shore of the God's Eye. Arya, Ghost, Brienne, and Gendry come running out from the blazing woods behind them. Every single one of the werewoods are now on fire. Dany screams out at Arya. There is dread in her voice. "Jon went into the water with Rhaegal," says Dany. Silence falls over the Isle of Faces. Everyone's fearful eyes look over at the lake, hoping Jon emerges from below. Ghost begins running up and down the shore, searching for Jon's body. The episode will fade to black as we see air bubbles breaking on the surface of the water.